Stacy Perez, he is Tyler Heil, and he is Jorge Edwards. Guys, tonight we have got Kevin Coleman from Football Guys and the Devy Royale podcast here with us tonight. He's going to take us to school on Devy Fantasy Football. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, before we get started, remember to go on over to that subscribe button on YouTube and hit that. Make sure you're getting all the notifications about our shows when we are going live so you can get all the latest fantasy football information, advice from all of us here at Fantasy in Frames. Guys, tonight we have got Kevin Coleman with us. Kevin, how are you? How's your week been?
I've been good. It's been great. I'm enjoying my summer off, man. I'm just excited to get on here. I've been doing like a Devy tour the last couple of weeks, so like I'm excited. I like to push this this kind of niche stuff that I talk about in the format that I love so much. So I really appreciate you guys having me on, so we can kind of dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I just self-admittedly don't know a ton about Devy, so I'm really excited about the show. I've got my pen, my piece of paper here. I'm going to take a bunch of notes so that I am all up to date. Jorge, how are you doing? How's your week going?
Yeah, it is much better. It's going much better. Granted, some of us had the Monday off, but it is much better being here with everybody here. It is great to talk with Kevin Coleman. I was saying before in the pre-show, folks, if you're new to the fantasy football space, it's very hard to find somebody more positive in this space than Kevin Coleman. So really lucky to have you on the show today, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I try to be positive. There's too much negativity out there. And, you know, Scott Fish is one of my guys that I truly respect and love. And to Devy, we'll talk about him in a little while. But, you know, he always pushes that. So I just try to be a positive. There's too much negative out there. So you try to be as positive as you can. You have your weak moments, but then you remember why you're here. And we get to talk football for an hour for fun. Like, this is fun. Like, this is what this is designed to be.
Absolutely.
Exactly. I look forward to this every week. Tyler, what's up? How are you doing?
I am wonderful. I'm a little disappointed because I wanted to wear my new hat that my wife got me for Father's Day, my new workout hat. It's Noble's Pride collection to celebrate Pride Month. But, you know, it doesn't really look good on camera, and it kind of puts shadow on my face. So, oh well. I just wanted to show it for a second.
You got to keep the moneymaker right in front of the camera, right?
I know. We have to keep Fantasy and Frames marketable, and as the face of Fantasy and Frames, I can't hide it.
Yes. Oh my goodness. All right, so Kevin, so you are on Football Guys and you do the Devy Royale podcast. Tell the people, if you could please, where they can find you and all of your content.
Yeah, you can find most of our Devy. So if you're here for Devy content, we have a Patreon that we actually have a bunch of different content on there. The Devy Royale Patreon for people that are new to the format or are they understand they played in the format. We have it all there. We have our YouTube channel. That's where we do a lot of free content for people that are new as well that don't necessarily want to pay. And in my Football Guys stuff, that's where I do a lot of my Dynasty and a little bit of redraft content over there. I have a weekly show on their YouTube channel, and then on top of that, we do articles and all kinds of other stuff. So you can check me out over there.
How do you have time to work? Oh my goodness. That is a lot going on. All right, guys. So we got Mr. Scampers in the chat over there. Devy Noob reporting for duty. Same here. Chalupa Batman explain Devy to me like I'm a 5-year-old. We are getting it. Absolutely. But first, we're going to do friendly banter. So this is where I like to find some random question before we get started talking about our actual topic and ask our guest. So Kevin, so you are a Cowboys fan. Is that right?
Unfortunately, yes, that is correct. I'm a diehard Cowboys fan.
Well, you and Jorge are going to have to play nice because he's a Commanders fan. And first, what we were going to do, we brought this out a while ago when Derek Carr was looking for love with his new team. Now we've got Zeke out here looking for love. So we want to know, I'm going to ask you, who is going to be swiping right on Ezekiel Elliott?
Yeah, I hope it's not Dallas. So let's just be clear. Don't go back to the person that when you break up, don't go back. Just don't do it. Like it's not there. Like it's time for him to move on. It's time for Dallas to move on. Honestly, I think for me, the two landing spots that make sense to me, and one makes a little bit more sense than the other. I think the Chargers make a lot of sense. He's familiar with Kellen Moore. When you're looking at that, I think he's a really good, 1-2 punch with Eckler. It will also save Eckler a little bit too, I think. And I think Eckler could be used more of a pass catching role as well in that offensive system. I think they really need a running back too. I mean, I know we have Isaiah Spiller, truthers out there and those other guys, but I would love for Zeke to maybe find his home in the Chargers. The Bengals make sense too. You just look for that team that needs that kind of running back too, that doesn't need a ton of usage from him, but they can be relevant in the red zone.
I like the Chargers because that doesn't ruin any running backs that I've already taken in any of my drafts already. So let him go to the Chargers. That's a great place. Jorge, do you have any landing spots for Mr. Elliott?
So I'm right there with you when it comes to the Chargers. It just kind of makes a lot of sense. You're preserving Eckler for him down the stretch, who's battled his share of injuries over the course of his career during the season. Just the overusage at a certain point you get worried about. The Kellen Moore reunion makes sense, so it, and they're going to be in a competitive division as always in the AFC West. So anytime you could have one of those, for lack of a better term, plotting running backs that just keeps you on the field. I understand his yards per attempt wasn't exactly as high as it had been in previous seasons, but it just makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I was also thinking about the Bengals. Chase Brown, truthers, hide you cover your ears here, but they have to replace Samaje Perine. They didn't really bring in anybody from a veteran standpoint to kind of fill in that role. And let's face it, with with what the legal situation is and isn't with Joe Mixon, they could be looking for a veteran running back to come in there and take away snaps if for some reason Mixon doesn't play. For Chase Brown truthers, uncover your ears. You may be able to see him and Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield, depending on how bad things go for Joe Mixon. So, yeah, I'm right there with you with both of those landing spots there, Kevin. Great minds think alike. What can I say?
Tyler, you have any thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I'm just going pure chaos here. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to go get lost in the Adirondacks somewhere, take a bunch of ayahuasca, and envision Ezekiel Elliott eating cereal out of a MetLife Stadium-shaped bowl, and he's going to go walk into Joe Douglas's office and say, sign this man right now, and Joe Douglas is going to say, yes, sir, may I have another? So he is going to go to the Jets, I think. He could. I think it would be a good spot. And realistically, joking aside, I think it would make sense. They obviously, Michael Carter kind of fell out of favor with them last year. Bam Knight took over. They drafted Izzy Abanikanda. I don't know if he's quite ready yet. So I really think they could use Zeke and Bam Knight to kind of cover their backs until Breece Hall comes back 100%. So I think that might be good for them and good for Zeke.
That was a really specific hypothetical about Aaron Rodgers and his journey.
I just made it up.
Listen, if that comes out, if something weird like that comes out in the news, I would probably believe it at this point. Like anything that they could possibly say, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right.
He's a weird cat, man. I'm here for all the Aaron Rodgers nonsense.
Oh, me too. Yeah. Right there. My boy. Listen, so Chalupa Batman thinks that he goes back to the Cowboys. I tend to think that he also goes back to the Cowboys just because when I was thinking about this question, I kind of envisioned a Friends scenario, right? If you will, if you guys can like dig back in your memories, remember when Ross and Rachel broke up, right? And he went out with the copy girl and then it was like, but we were on a break. Like that's what I foresee happening. Like Zeke's going to come back. And in this scenario, guys, like Zeke is Rachel. Okay. Jerry Jones is Ross 100%. And poor Tony Pollard is the copy girl. Okay. Like they're going to come back and Jerry's going to go, but we were on a break. I'm so sorry. Come back, please. I think that's what's going to happen if, who knows, but guys, make sure
Stacy,
you are done.
Were they on a break? Were Ross and Rachel on a break?
No, they were not on a break. They were absolutely not on a break. No, of course not. No, Tyler, were they? What do you think?
I'm not answering that question. You're the host. I was trying to give you the opportunity.
We might have to in the chat. in the chat. We're Ross and Rachel on a break. I want to hear everyone else's thoughts. While you're doing that and putting that information in there, make sure that you're putting your comments and your questions for Kevin about Devy into the chat. Chris, what is up? Thank you for joining in. I know Chris is a big time Devy fan, so I'm sure he's going to have some really good questions for us. So let's get started. Let's dive into this. First topic for you, Kevin, super basic. What is Devy? Tell us what is Devy?
Oh man, yeah. So just to keep it as simple as possible, all it stands for, Scott Fish started it, and it really just starts for developmental. And essentially, it's like the way I always explain it to people. If you know baseball and they have a minor league system, essentially you just have a minor league system on your dynasty team. That's all it is. And then so all you do is you draft your dynasty team, and then you have another draft, and everybody loves extra drafts. Like, so if you like drafting, like everybody drafts and then they leave, right? No, you don't have to do that because now you have extra drafts. You get to draft college guys. And it can be as many rounds as you want. There's different formats, and we'll get into that. But essentially all it is you draft a dynasty team, and then you get a couple more rounds and you draft college football players. They sit on your taxi squad, and you can trade them now, right? So like I have Caleb Williams on a team already, and I can use him in a tradable asset. And essentially that's all it is. The very basic term is just developmental. Think of baseball, a taxi squad that you can use these college guys as tradable assets. And there's nothing, you don't have to watch. You don't even have to watch college football. Like even if you don't like college football, you just have them there, and you can use them as assets. And it's something that just adds a little bit of a strategy and a wrinkle to your dynasty leagues.
So, Kevin, you had me at you don't have to watch college football because I typically don't watch college football unless it's like national championship.
Exactly.
And then so like how long has Devy been around? Because I feel like is it relatively new, or have I just been like head in the sand?
Oh man, I think Scott Fish invented it in the early 2000s, in the middle 2000s, somewhere in there. Like it was extremely niche then. I will say that it's still niche, like, and I think that like sometimes, fantasy Twitter can be kind of like a weird environment because we think it's bigger than it really is. And like we did a poll recently at Football Guys, and it said, hey, what kind of content would you like more of? Devy and like C2C in college got less than 1% of 600,000 votes. So that is to show you how niche it kind of is. It's still niche, like, and it's just because like you said, we don't have time to watch college football all the time. So it's been around for a while. I think it's gotten more. I think what has happened is it's gotten a little bit more popular because there's people that are trying to push it and get a little bit. Ray GQ has done an amazing job with that. Ray's an awesome guy, and he kind of pushed it, for a few years, and he still obviously does it. But also, we're all degenerates. So we always want to add something a little bit to our like leagues. And I think what has happened is Dynasty has gotten to the point where there's super smart people in it. Like there's some incredible Dynasty analysts, and Dynasty has not gotten anymore where you get like today, the Trey Lance day or whatever. Like you're not getting a bunch of guys to just like over analyze this like quote from Schefter where you can just trade them immediately or whatever the case may be. Now people are really smart at it. Well, there's one area that people not necessarily aren't that smart as Devy yet. So if you add that to your league, you have an advantage now. So I really think it's come from, it started early as a niche kind of thing. Now it's more of like I want to show how smart I am type of thing, just like Dynasty used to be. And now that we have so many good Dynasty stuff, that's kind of gotten a little less hard. And now it's the harder version of it.
All right. Jorge, I think you had a question for Kevin, right?
Yeah. So I'm trying to keep it on the straight and narrow path here with getting into the introduction for Devy, but I just wanted to ask maybe a little bit more advanced question when it comes to player scouting and just, you said you can bring as many college players as you want into here. When we're doing a lot of our dynasty content, especially leading up to the draft, the word breakout age becomes something that has become synonymous with your analysis, right? Oh, well, they had a breakout age at 18.9 years old, or this or that, or they had a dominator rating at, so-and-so. Are stats like that or metrics like that equally valued when you're talking about looking at Devy players, or is that something that's kind of hard to do because they're so young in their careers that you can't really use those metrics, so to speak, unless they have a really young breakout age, obviously, right?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think so. There's incredibly smart people trying to do that. So we've had a lot of groups and a lot of people try to figure out, okay, how do you break these guys out? What I would say is like, with freshmen or the younger guys, that's where the scouting and the film-based stuff comes from, is seeing these guys and understanding it. There are guys that are trying to like go to huddle tape. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen huddle tape from high school. It's shot in like the camcorder from like the cheerleader's mom and it's really bad, but like it is not the greatest. But people are trying to extract like miles per hour based on that, which I don't think is possible. So they have been trying to do that. But what I would say is like, there are different metrics. So, wide receivers, you don't want them not to produce their freshman year. Like they historically speaking, wide receivers, you need to make sure that they have some type of production. Running backs don't necessarily need that, because we've seen a lot of 5-star kids just kind of go to Alabama and have to sit for a couple years. So there are little metrics that you want to hit. But that's where I think I have gravitated towards Devy early, is because I love film and I love scouting and that type of thing. And I think that's where it gets me kind of that edge a little bit in terms of like knowing where these prospects are at. I will say, though, to keep it very simple, if you're getting new to it, there's very simple, like, how would you want to like scout a running back? If the kid is a freshman and he's under 200 pounds, I don't even like, I'm out. Like, you got to be 200. You have to hit that threshold for me. Wide receivers, you want to hit like, speed thresholds and stuff like that. And to be quite honest, if they're quarterbacks and tight ends, I don't even mess with them in Devy for the most part, because there's so many misses. So like there's little things you can do for sure. And I think it gets you smarter, and there's definitely dominator rating and all that kind of stuff that you hear of. But yeah, that's the other challenging part of it, is like, who are these kids, right? Like, where are they going to school? And I can definitely bore you guys to death. Like, I actually have a rating list of like where they go to school at and how they produce in like Texas 6A as compared to Louisiana 3A. But you guys don't want to hear that. That's the
wow.
limit to it.
I kind of do.
Yes.
That's great. Okay, so Drew wants to know, what would you say is the toughest positive? Say the toughest positive is to evaluate or project in Devy. Is it quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end?
So I think like any position, quarterback's always going to be the toughest. I think that tight end is extremely difficult because, Michael Mayer was the tight end 1 in Devy for 3 years, and then he was the tight end 3 in the NFL draft. And I think both those positions are really hard. The problem is, and I think the difference is quarterbacks, you're going to spend really top draft capital in those drafts on those guys. Whereas tight ends, like I just did a 10-round mock recently to kind of, shore up my knowledge a little bit where people are drafting guys, and a tight end, there was only 2 tight ends taken in like 8 rounds. So like, you're not having to use really big capital on there. People miss the quarterbacks. Like, you see these Sam Howell, DJU, like a lot of these guys where they were getting first round, Spencer Rattler from South Carolina. People just miss on those things. And I think the reason why the quarterback position is so difficult is because we don't have all the pieces there. We don't know how they're reading defenses in high school and how that's going to translate. You have to be very careful with that. The perfect example is going to be Arch Manning. So we have a Manning coming. He's a freshman at Texas, and he was rated really high coming into the year. And then he's seen a dip in his value because he played in Louisiana, not necessarily against the best competition. He's going to take some time to really develop. But you have to be very careful with that quarterback position. That is the toughest, in my opinion, to really nail down because of all the misses that we've seen.
I'm so glad you brought up Arch Manning, because that was the one player that I did know, just because I just love the Mannings. And I was like, oh, so intrigued by him. So I was like, I'm so glad that you brought him up, because I was definitely going to ask you, like, how do you rank him, like, coming out, like, as a first year, I was freshman this year and all that. But yeah, that was definitely something on my mind. Chris wants to know about Trey Benson, where you have him ranked.
So, man, let me think off the top of my head in my rankings. I will say Trey for us was a big riser at the Devy Royale, like in November. We started getting on him a little bit, and Christian Williams was higher on that. I know he has him at 2. I have him in my top 5 right now of the class. So he's in that 5th, 6th area. I'm not as like, I don't want to say crazy because Christian's not crazy, but I'm not as like, I tend to be a little bit of a floor kind of ranker in terms of guys like that, but he could really climb at Florida State. He fits that mold. And I will say this for every Dynasty fan out there, the 2024 class could be good, but I don't want to be that guy that says it's always better than the next class. But the running backs have to hit. And there's a lot of question marks on the running backs right now. I'm not really comfortable with any of the running backs in the 24 class right now because they all have a ton of question marks. Trey could pop up because of those question marks, and because he's in a really good offense and he can really kind of hit that volume threshold that you like to see at Florida State, and he has all the measurables. So yeah, I think he could be in that top 5. He's certainly rising. Like at the beginning of the January, he had no ADP. Now he's going like the 3rd round. So he's definitely rising.
So like there's so much more involved with Devy and so much more that you're learning and really diving into. Do you feel like this gives you, like if you're really into Devy, do you think it gives you an advantage over, some other people that you might be playing with just in regular dynasty leagues or more like casual league managers?
So this is like the weird one. I'm actually kind of different on this because there are some that will say like, you should be playing in it. And I don't necessarily think it gives you too big of an advantage. I think 2 things it helps you with. And I wouldn't say like, because a lot of good dynasty managers, they don't even check in until after the NFL draft. Like I know a lot of them don't. And that's totally fine too. Like I get that. The 2 ways that I would feel like it does help you a little bit is, one, for me, it's helped me project some of those sleepers and what they measure at. Like, we were pretty high on Tyjae Spears before he kind of had that breakout against USC, kind of based on what, Jorge was talking about earlier of like what we look for, dominator rating, yards per team reception, some of these other, advanced stats. So it does help you there kind of identify some of those sleepers. So I think the big thing for me has helped is I know where the value is in the picks. So like my 2024 picks, if I'm a contender and I have a late 24 pick, based on the class, I'm kind of nervous about those running back class. So I think it's like a top 5 class. So assuming so basically saying I have the 101 to the 105, that's pretty valuable. Marvin Harrison Jr., Caleb Williams, Drake May, some of those guys. But after that, because of those question marks, I'm more willing to get rid of my first for NFL talent and go win it. Because I know what the class looks like. And like that was like last year, like I traded a lot of my 23 picks because the value was so high. It was like the holy grail trying to like, trade those bad boys. And then also I knew like, some of those guys, those late round picks, I wasn't very high on Sean Tucker. I wasn't very high on some of the guys getting drafted in that range. So I got rid of them. So I do think it gives you an advantage knowing the pick value, which couldn't be good, right? When you're trying to trade your picks. And I do think identifying maybe sleepers like Puka Nacua was a guy that I really like, I don't know, 2 years ago, so I drafted him in a league 2 years ago because I'm a degenerate. And I could see that, like, I liked kind of his upside, but then you got to get lucky too. Like you got to have these guys hit and do those type of things. I don't necessarily think it makes you a better dynasty manager, to be honest, but it does allow you to have values and gives you kind of an edge. So maybe a little bit.
Okay. So I have like a logistical question, and this might be really basic, but I was wondering kind of like when I was putting this together. So like when you're doing your Devy draft, right? Like from freshman to senior, or like are all these guys available, or is it just specific years? How does that work? Could I go in right now and let's say like draft Arch Manning? Like would that be something that's possible?
So it's all based on what you want to do as a league. So this is why it's kind of cool. Devy's fun is like, if you get 12 people together, I know some leagues out there, you guys are going to laugh. Shane Hallman is in this league. They draft 8th graders. So like they go really deep because they're crazy, right? Like now you don't have to go that deep if you don't want. They call it the pinnacle of Devy, and it is an insane league. Most standard Devy leagues, it's freshmen through seniors. So like you can just draft any college age kids. So that's kind of how most standard leagues are. But I do know some beginner leagues. What they do is they just draft the next class. So they're allowed to draft the 2024 class. And then after they do that, the 2025 class. So they kind of have like, it's a rookie Devy hybrid type thing when they incorporate it. So it's really up to the league to decide how they do it. Like I've had pipeline leagues. So my favorite draft I've ever done is I was the commissioner of the league, is we threw in schools. So essentially in the startup at 101, you could take Alabama if you wanted to. And then you got every Alabama player for 4 years that came out of Alabama. And then you could take Patrick Mahomes at 101. It was up to you how you wanted to build it. So it's as crazy as you want to get or as vanilla as you want to get. And I always recommend, if you guys just, want basic, just keep it simple, college players only. But once you get into it, you start getting like, oh yeah, I want to draft these guys and I want to get a little deeper. Yeah.
Or you could go super deep like Chris over here, who's got the rights to Mahomes' son apparently in his league, which puts those 8th grade guys to shame. Now we're drafting preschoolers over here.
Unborn children.
That's next level, Chris. Chris also wants to know, outside of Caleb Williams and Drake May, who is quarterback 3? So it looks like he said he's fighting between a few guys and he's ready to put Riley Leonard on there. Kevin, do you feel the same?
I mean, not QB3, I don't think. I do think that the QB3 is wide open. And we actually, our new video next week that we've already recorded because we don't have any time in our lives. I know Riley Leonard was one of our undervalued Devy assets right now because it's wide open. And to be honest, like, he's a very solid quarterback. He's got to do that development. He is a dual threat kid. So you have seen that. I think he had 450 yards rushing last year, somewhere around there, maybe probably a little bit more. So you could slot him in there. And that's the other thing with the 24 class that everybody should know. Like, there's 2 quarterbacks that people are pretty sure about, but after that, there are a lot of question marks. So again, when you're thinking of the value of that class, it's down a little bit. And we've seen quarterbacks hit or miss. But Riley Leonard is definitely one of those kids that can take off because there's no solid QB3. And he has the tools, 6'4", 214. Like, he's your prototypical, like, kid. Kind of, and people are going to comp him like some Daniel Jones and some of these other guys. But he does have that development in him. And if he does step up, you could be the quarterback 3 of the class.
Oh, so he's Daniel Jones because he's a tall white guy from Duke.
Yeah, that's how we do comps here. We just roll. We just roll with it. It's totally okay. Like, Does
he also look like Lloyd Christmas? Is my question. From Dumb and Dumber, right?
That's good. That's a good reference. That's
right? He does. Look it up. Google him. They look alike. All right, Tyler. So I think you wanted to ask a little bit about strategies for Devy leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still kind of blown away at like this whole you can have as many rounds as you want. By that, do you mean just what your league agrees upon?
Yeah. So it's just totally dependent on the leagues. So that's part of it. Oh, thank you, David. Appreciate you. I love you, David.
Will
yeah.
Levis.
Don't call me the Will Levis. It's just because I'm white. All right. So yeah, I think for me, it's all league dependent. I think that's the biggest thing in terms of like how you set up your league and where that comes from. Definitely all league dependent on how that works. And I really want to like emphasize, if you want to get into this, get into it with like people that are either all new or they're all kind of have been in one before, because you really want to grow and kind of learn together on this type of thing. And then like if you make mistakes, they're not huge mistakes. One person can't just run the league, or you're not getting like veteran guys in that. So yeah, I totally get in there with people that have really no idea what they're doing either. And then you can kind of grow with the format and it's not going to kind of turn people off a little bit. Because I see that a lot. I see some people jump in the leagues with kind of sharks in the league. And then they're like, well, I don't know any of these guys. And then they leave. And that's not what we want. We want people to have a good experience in the format.
Okay. All right. I guess I'm sorry. I'm going to keep asking questions about this drafting. What's preventing you from drafting someone? Like if you have a 4-round rookie draft, let's say, there's guys we certainly know are going to come out. There's guys we're really high on, but like, are you just going to a scouting site, Max Preps, Rivals, and just grabbing whatever 5-star you can find?
Oh, okay. For us, what we try to provide for our patrons. So we just came up with this a few months ago because we realized people were having, value problems. So like they're struggling valuing guys. And so what we did is we said, all right. And then this took a while. Like, I'm just going to let everybody know, like we spent a lot of time on this, way too long. And we created Devy Dynasty combined rankings. And so what we did, and because valuing your prospects is super hard. So like I was talking about, let's just do Jackson Arnold. He's a 5-star quarterback going to Oklahoma. How the hell do you value Jackson Arnold with like Daniel Jones in the NFL? Because you have to, because if you draft both of these guys, you need to know, like, if I want to trade these guys, where that goes. So what we said is we needed to do something for people. And so we created these combined rankings, and we've combined. So we have consensus rankings among 4 of us. Essentially like 150 quarterbacks. I've ranked 150 quarterbacks this year, 200 running backs, 200 wide receivers, and 150 tight ends for both NFL and college. And so what that does is it pulls everything together. And basically you can see. So, for example, Caleb Williams is my quarterback 9 overall right now. So that's assuming that he gets first round draft capital, top 5. I would value him just outside the tier of Lamar Jackson. But what that does for everybody is if you have Caleb Williams, you can see like, okay, this is where this kid gets valued. I'm going to trade him, or I can use him as a trade asset. And then to your question too, like we also, when you see our combined rankings, it also organizes into the Devy rankings. So you'll see like where we value every single player in the class. And I think, you know, when you have rankings like that, it allows you to kind of see, okay, how's this 5-star come from? Where does it do it? As far as my process of looking how I rank guys, yeah, to your point, I mean, you know, 5-star is pretty good. They do a really good job, like 247 Sports and these guys, of finding these guys and ranking them. And then essentially, like Travis May does a great job. He works for Mojo. He created this big database. It's like 4 and 5-star, and he compares that to draft capital. If they have a 4 or 5-star, I think they hit the draft capital that you want like over 80% of the time. So even if you're new to the format, if you just go after those guys, you're going to hit some, because just based on that, you're fine. And then you essentially, you just go through it. And then there's always those guys that fall through in 5 stars, but you have that base. Then you look at, like I talked about earlier, where did they play ball? Then you go to the film. And so I have grades on all that stuff. So like I give them a grade based on my scouting. I give them a grade based on where they played. I give them a grade on their 5-star, on their measurables. And then I basically have a cumulative grade. And then that helps me with my ranking. So I do that all throughout the year. I already have 27 class going right now. I've already dived into the next class for freshmen. So I started that already. And then you go, and then I'm able to provide that to our patrons. But also, like, if you're new to the format, there's some free ones out there. I'd be very careful with the free ones, because you don't necessarily know how like in tune that scouting part is, because they could just take the 5-star guys, right? And that's what I was doing when I first started. I was Googling 5-star 247 Sports and just looking for some dudes. Oh, he hasn't got drafted yet? Okay, I'm going to put him in. And that definitely, because you'll have some misses there for sure. But, you know, just finding a good resource, and there's tons out there. Ray's got a great one out there in terms of the Devy stuff that he does. And just trying to identify where those come from is super important. And then you just go from there. And I think, and you're going to have misses. That's the fun part about it. Like, you're going to miss. But yeah, starting at the 5 and 4 stars is a great part, you know, to start. And then you just kind of work your way down.
Nice. There we go. We've got one from JCJ Dynasty, which Jorge was going to read, and then I cut him off.
Thank you. So he says, JCJ Dynasty says, you talked about Manning at Texas. What are your thoughts on Malik Murphy after a strong spring? Is he a Devy dark horse that could either play if Ewers falters or transfers somewhere and balls out?
Yeah, so Malik Murphy was kind of forgotten about. You know, Manning came in and people thought he was going to be the takeover, and he's not. I think Malik Murphy definitely has that. I heard that he got the bag. So NIL is a real thing now. So they're paying these kids to stay in school. And I heard Malik Murphy got the bag because there was a lot of schools going after him, like Florida and some of these other places. So yeah, I think Malik can take over. I think that he has a dark horse shot at taking over next year if Ewers leaves, if Ewers becomes a quarterback 3 of the class. And Manning, you know, has some questions he's got to really develop. Other than that, Murphy's going to start somewhere next year. I'm not sure where. If he does at Texas, it wouldn't surprise me, but he's definitely going to get a starting job.
Okay. Hey, I have another logistical question for you. All right, let's say you have your Devy draft. You go and draft Arch Manning. Mm-hmm. Are you locked into him? Like, how many roster spots do you have for these guys? Are you locked into him until he goes pro and then you can drop him? Like, how does that work?
No, man. That's the great thing about Devy is, so roster spots can be, that's up to the league. What I would say is, if you start a league, have unlimited roster spots. Don't limit yourself, because nobody likes limiting spots. Like, that's just like, I hate when super flex leagues do that too. Like, don't limit quarterbacks. Don't be that person. That's just terrible. Like, I just have as open as possible. No, if you draft Arch, then you have his rights essentially. Essentially, that's what it is. But you can trade him. You can move him. You could drop him if you want to. I mean, if there's not roster spot limits, then you don't necessarily have to drop him. But that's what makes Devy fun. And I want to just reiterate that with people is, like, I draft a lot of Devy guys that I never see on my NFL side. Like I just roll and I just like, I love to trade and especially in Devy, people fall in love with picks and rookies. You guys know that Dynasty, you know how that goes. Devy's even more. They love these guys because they want to, and you have to manipulate them a little bit. They're your league mates. You gotta manipulate them a little bit. They want to prove how smart they are. They want to draft Arch Manning and Arch Manning be quarterback one and say, see, I did that, and then post it on Twitter and get a bunch of likes. Like that's what they want to do. So what you do is you use that against them, and you take Arch Manning and you trade him for a top 15 asset, and you go win the NFL side because that's the side that matters. So the thing about it is, you don't have to keep them there. And I highly recommend if you're in Devy, you don't, because there's so many misses that you're not going to be able to replenish your NFL side. So I try to retool and trade as much as I possibly can. So if you love trading, this is a really good format for you because it adds just more people to trade. And that's the coolest thing about Dynasty is trading. So the more you get to trade, and then I will say it's hard for people to trade when they don't know player values. That's why we created our Dynasty Devy combined ranking so that they can at least see it. They're not perfect, and people have definitely could have probably called us dumb, but it's something to at least help some type of value. And I do have free. I have to update them. So please don't go on YouTube and yell at me. But on our YouTube channel, this year I did tiers, but what I did is I did Devy tiers with their Dynasty value of where I would kind of, gauge them for free to help people with trades. It's definitely was before the NFL draft. I haven't been able to go back and update that yet, but that could be a good place to start so you could take a look.
All right. And I don't think you're dumb. I just think you're a little crazy, but we're all a little crazy.
You have to be if you're a fantasy football fanatic.
Yeah, in June.
Exactly. Exactly. So Kevin, I have we're talking about Devy. We're talking about how, for me, I listened to everything you're saying, and this screams like Inception for fantasy football, just the layers and the layers and the layers and all the way to 8th grade, potentially depending on how deep you go. So let's get back to a basic question here. What platforms can we use to play Devy?
Okay, so this is the one area where it's going to limit you a little bit. MFL, my fantasy league, this is where they're going to get the MFL versus sleeper people out there. But just comment below, get that YouTube algorithm going. I will say MFL is fully customizable. So if you know how to use the platform and use the format and how you can actually create players. So you can go in and create all of these Devy guys, and you can actually physically place them on people's roster. But you have to have a commissioner. Like I'm in a league with Ryan McDowell from DLF. He does that. He goes in, he creates all these players for us and puts them in there. If you want to keep it simple, Sleeper is usable. So what I do for Sleeper is so let's say we have our initial startup draft of 30 rounds or whatever you do. We add whatever rounds we have after. So let's say we have 34. So we have 4-round Devy draft after we do the initial one. We'll add 34 rounds. And then starting in that 31st round, you can draft Vinny Testaverde or a kicker or whoever the heck you want, like whatever person you want. And then underneath their nickname, you put the player. So Caleb Williams is the 101 under Vinny Testaverde, and then you put them on the taxi squad so that you see them and you can see them at least like tradable assets. Some people do like Excel spreadsheets, but spreadsheets scare the hell out of me, everybody. Like I am not like a technology guy. Jay Stein makes fun of me all the time. He's our analytics guy. Like I don't like doing that extra step because in reality, like to make this format work, it needs to be as less intensive as possible. You need to make sure it's very simple. So just putting their nickname and their player on there, and then they see them, and then you can at least trade and do that stuff. That can happen. I do know Fantrax has an option where you can add that because they do have a lot of these college players already inputted because they do college fantasy. But you'd have to play your league on Fantrax, and I've never played like a fantasy league on Fantrax before in terms of like NFL side, so I don't know what that looks like. But Sleeper tends to be the easiest if you just play their nicknames in there.
Okay, so let's take this a step further. Let's stick with Sleeper. You're new to fantasy football, or you're wanting to create a league. You enter your username. It gives you the option Redraft Dynasty or whatever. And then you just go through the emotions. Boom, you set up your league. You can invite people in. You mentioned earlier in the show, your recommendation is either start Devy with a group of people who are actually new to it or have been to it for a long time. In both those situations, where did you find your entrance into a league? or leagues, and where can people go, do you think, is the best way to find leagues where they are either a new person and being introduced to the league, or they're a bunch of friends who just want to get into creating a Devy league? Where can you go for that, like a resource for that?
Yeah. So the two spots that I've always found, especially before I even was a content creator, DLF forums. So DLF Dynasty, league there, they do a good job. They actually have like a Devy section for Devy leagues only. So if you go there, there's a lot of people on there looking for Devy leagues. So DLF to me is one of the best ways. Now, I make sure they use League Safe, and when you're starting leagues with people you don't know, just be smart with if you're giving money, in the case may be on that. But I've always found them to be very, very good people. I'm still in leagues with a few of them in those leagues. So like, that's definitely an avenue. Being in the community helps too, to transition that way. And also the Discords, one area that I think that has really grown is Discord, even though I still kind of don't know how to use it. But like every Discord I'm in, even like John Bauer's Dynasty Theory Discord that I'm in, they have a Devy section. So like, you could definitely just pop in and say, hey, who wants to play in a Devy league? And I will say, everybody that's listening or, listens to this later, I actually have Devy bylaws already made. They're sample bylaws, and you can have them. Just DM me. We have on our YouTube channel, I have a video called Intro to Devy if you don't want to DM me, and it's in the description. Like, you literally can just go make a copy, and you can format it however you want, but it's a very basic, this is how we do a Devy bylaws, and you can just steal them. And so if you want to be the commissioner and you want to take that role or have a co-commissioner, I've tried to create that to make it as easy as possible for people new to the format. And you just take them. But if DLF works, getting that group of people together, shows and stuff like that really does work. And to me, how I got into it, I had a buddy named Barry, and we were both college football fans, and he had an opening in one of his leagues of Devy, and he's like, hey, do you want to come play? I was like, what the hell is Devy? That's some weird thing. What are you trying to invite me to, buddy? And like, he's like, no, it's this. And like, so I just literally got into this format on a whim. And now I, do content for it. So like, it's definitely out there, but like, yeah, Discords, Devy, and use my bylaws, just go steal them, and you can change them however you want, but at least gives you a framework.
So let's dive into that a little bit more. You talked about when you first started, when you got into it, around, late May, June in Dynasty, you see a lot of startups happening.
Mm-hmm.
You see some people, like for myself, when I joined my first couple Dynasty leagues, it was before the NFL draft a couple years ago. So, I mean, there are different times during the year that people can enter and start a league, right?
Yeah.
What time of year did you enter your first Devy league, and what time of year would you recommend somebody do that?
Yeah, so I entered in January, and I would not recommend that. If you're new to the format, the reason why, if you're new to the format in January, there is so much change in college football that happens, especially with the portal, the transfer portal now that's open, and like just a ton of movement. You're never going to know when these guys are and where they're at. And so don't do it in January. However, if you are really good at Devy, doing it in January can help, because you will find a ton of value. Like Trey Benson, the question that we had earlier, he was not getting drafted in like 10-round drafts in January. Now he's going in the third round. So there is kind of a gamemanship a little bit in terms of when you want to join. If you're new, what I would highly recommend is you start in June. So if you're new and you want to start a new league, and July works too. So the summer, really, like, just start in June or July, because you pretty much have a solidified base for what the college rosters look like, what college football is going to be, and kind of like the guys there in all this area, and like, the rankings. So definitely do that.
Nice. Okay, so last question for you. Sorry. If you could give us 3 tips for starting a Devy league, what would those 3 tips be, or to anybody out there that's listening and watching?
So the first tip I would do is don't overvalue quarterbacks. Don't go into a draft and be like, oh, I'm in a super flex draft, I need to go get quarterbacks. Don't overvalue them. The way I look at Devy in terms of, if I'm in a dynasty, I have a dynasty team, I always try to shore up my quarterbacks anyway, in terms of like my dynasty side, so I don't have to reach at the quarterback position anyway. So yeah, don't overvalue. You can put tight ends in there too. So quarterbacks and tight ends to me are don't overvalue. So right now, for everybody going through there's only 3 quarterbacks I'm very comfortable drafting in Devy right now, and that's Caleb Williams out of USC, Drake May out of North Carolina, and then Drew Aller out of Penn State. And even he's like, I'm nervous. Like he's going in the second round, so I'm okay with him. But that's how comfortable I am. Whereas a lot of these guys will reach on that. So like my next tip is really to target, those high-end 5-star running backs in the second and third round. So you'll see a lot of dip in that. Like there's a kid named Justice Haynes out of Alabama. He was probably one of the most talented backs right now as a freshman. He's going to be a freshman, but his ADP is in the third round because what people are doing is they will target running backs with like a lot of production in the second round. So like Blake Corum, who I love as a Michigan fan, I love Blake Corum, but I don't know if he's going to get anything better than day 3 capital. So what they look at though, he had 1,600 yards last year. Like Chase Brown, for example, at Illinois, he had 1,600 to 1,800 yards or whatever the case may be. But they'll draft that because they're box scoring it and not looking at necessarily where the best players are. And the best player is Justice Haynes in that second or third round. So I do try to target those 5-star running backs in that second and third round because they definitely give you back value and have that there. And then like my third tip for, if you're new, someone starting out in Devy, keep it simple in terms of how many rounds you go. I would keep your first Devy league to like a 2-round max. You don't need to get as deep as 5 rounds, right? Like, or 10 rounds as some Devy drafts there are. It is totally okay to do 2 rounds. And I would argue 1 is fine too. I like 2 though, because you get a little deeper and you get to have a little bit more fun. Like, okay, we know the top guys. Let's see if we can kind of get these other areas in there and start really small. Like, and do not go into those leagues that draft like 8th graders. That is not for you. Don't even try it. Don't even try the high school stuff. Just keep it very simple. Do 1 or 2 rounds of Devy. See if you even like it, right? You might not even like it. There's plenty of people out there that don't like different formats. And then you can kind of go from there. Because the biggest thing you don't want in your leagues is a lot of turnover for Devy. And the number one reason why is because it's a hard orphan to fill in terms of Devy, because not everybody's want to jump in there and they always want to draft a team. So to keep the league healthy and make sure it stays, try to keep it as friendly as possible for first timers. To make sure that you have that balance, because we hate when leagues fold. It sucks. It happens. But especially this format. So just keep it as easy and simple as possible. And then if you really become a degenerate, you can always start another league. We don't have enough leagues. All of us in here definitely don't play in way too many leagues. So you can always be like, hey, this is cool. Let me go start a 10-round one now. And then you really get into it. But keep it simple. Like, I think that's my biggest stress on that. Just keep it simple because it's supposed to be fun. Like, you don't need to kind of dive into too much too soon.
Nice. Thanks, man.
So, Kevin, before we go, I want to ask you to please give us some sleepers, some guys from 2024 that nobody's got on their radar yet. I'm not talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. Everybody knows about him. I can't wait to draft him next year. But I want to know some guys that I should be looking out for that I don't even know yet. I don't even know their names at this point.
You see, you're ready to play Devy. You already know Marvin Harrison Jr. You just got to take that plunge, Stacy. See, you're good to go. Yeah. So I think the 2024 class, we heard one earlier. So when you're thinking of like Trey Benson, that's a good one. That's a really, it depends on how deep you guys, you kind of want to go. I would say Bucky Irving from Oregon, running back. Bucky's going to be an interesting case. He's 194 pounds. So the Devin O'Shane is going to be like the tester. Okay, what is Devin going to do in the NFL? But Bucky Irving's a guy that hasn't gotten a ton of love out there in terms of like a top prospect of the 24 class, but 194 pounds, 5'10", explosive, had over 1,000 yards rushing last year for Oregon. He's a guy to keep on your kind of radar at that running back position. Donovan Edwards from Michigan, he's the second fiddle to Blake Corum, really good receiver. He's a guy that's probably going to get some love out there. The wide receiver position in the 24 class, there is a lot of unknown after the top 2. So you have Marvin Harrison Jr., you have Emeka Egbuka. He's the wide receiver at Ohio State as well. I freaking hate Ohio State. They have everybody. But Emeka and Marvin are considered the kind of the areas there. I would keep an eye on Malik Neighbors from LSU. He's getting some buzz right now, and LSU wide receivers don't necessarily miss in the NFL when we're thinking of like projecting recruiting, Chase and Jefferson, maybe Terrace Marshall season. That's what I heard recently on social media, but I don't know if you can trust everything you hear on there. But Malik Neighbors definitely has the size and the frame, 6 foot, 215, a big kid. And also just a phenomenal athlete. So those are the guys that really stand out to me as maybe being the guys to watch. There's other deeper guys in there that you could probably mention, but just to keep it simple, those guys are in that class. Quarterbacks are fun right now because there's so many unknowns after quarterback too. And so like we're going to be hearing Riley Leonard, like we talked about earlier on the show, JJ McCarthy from Michigan, maybe. And then Bo Nix has made a resurgence. I think this is, 5th year in college. He's on the Van Wilder plan, but he almost was a Heisman finalist last year. And a lot of people think like, hey, he's coming back there. So those are the guys that kind of think about and know, but just understand that the 24 class has a lot more question marks than they do. And I think people are really worried because of how the 23 class panned out. But if the running backs hit in the 24 class, you could be looking at 5 first-round running backs in terms of like that first round of rookie drafts. If they hit, and that'll be extremely valuable. But again, that's a big if.
Nice. So question for you real quick, Bo Nix. Is he as old as Stetson Bennett?
He's younger than Stetson Bennett. He's younger. Stetson. I cannot believe. Really quick. I know you guys want to kick me off, but I thought after Stetson was done at Georgia, I would never have to talk about him again. But then I went on a Fantasy Pros podcast recently, and they asked me about Stetson Bennett. I was like, no, I'm not supposed to talk about this guy anymore. He's supposed to be selling freaking car insurance somewhere else, where I was done with Stetson Bennett. He's the vein of my existence, Stetson Bennett. He kills me.
Kevin, let me just say, I'm sorry, Stacy.
No, I was just a silly joke. Go ahead.
You just dropped a Van Wilder reference. You're never leaving. This stream is going to be continuing on indefinitely. So
that's my movie, man. I love Van Wilder. I'm old though, so I watch those movies a lot.
Love it.
That is amazing. Kevin, I just want to say a huge thank you to you for spending your night with us and just being so generous with your time tonight. Guys, make sure you are following Kevin at @DuBois_22. You can also find him on Football Guys, and you can find out more about Devy over on the Devy Royale podcast. Kevin, before we go, what are you working on right now?
Oh man, what am I not working on? We are doing a big Devy Manifesto update. So our first version of the Devy Manifesto, we actually do a depth chart breakdowns of every Power 5 team, plus rankings, plus sleepers, and all that stuff. So the first edition was 400 pages long with graphics and all of that. So we're doing an update, and so I'm working on that right now to get out in the next couple of weeks here, and it's going to add non-Power 5 schools. We're looking at kind of sleepers and stuff like that. So that's one of our big projects going on. And then always at our YouTube channel, we have 4 videos a week, and in Football Guys, you can find me over there for the Dynasty stuff.
Nice. All right, guys. So make sure you are following all of us here on Twitter. You can follow Tyler over at FF Tyler Heil. You can follow Jorge at Jorge B. Edwards. I'm at Stacy_Perez83. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button for more fantasy and frames content. Guys, have a great night. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.